The night ripped open with silence so heavy it pressed against the chest, and then a gasp, faint but alive, broke it apart. Ash blinked into a world of shadows, eyes opening for the first time as the den quivered around him. Lira curled her body protectively, her breath ragged from the storm that rattled the trees outside. Kellan stood rigid at the mouth of the cave, ears pricked to the dark forest, his growl low, vibrating like a warning drum. The wind howled through the pines, carrying with it the distant cries of rivals who had already caught the scent. Lira whispered, "Stay close, little one," though her gaze never left Kellan's rigid frame. Ash whimpered, his tiny body pressed against the earth that trembled beneath paws not yet steady. The storm snapped branches like bones, and shadows swayed with menace. Kellan said, "They are near." The words were short, brittle, as if torn from his chest. Ash's eyes, wide and unsteady, caught flickers of lightning beyond the cave, illuminating the truth of survival. The first thing he saw was fear, and the second was love, tangled together in the same fragile breath. The storm clawed at the forest, and the den seemed smaller than ever. Ash whimpered as the cold air pressed in through cracks in the stone. Lira licked his tiny head, whispering comfort through touch alone. Kellan remained at the entrance, unmoving, his eyes like embers staring into the black unknown. Each rumble of thunder shook the earth, carrying with it the scent of fear and blood. Lira said, "The night does not forgive weakness." Her voice was trembling, not from doubt but from truth. Ash curled closer into her fur, body fragile and thin against the cruel weight of the wild. Kellan growled again, the sound like a stone breaking inside his chest. He said, "If they come, we fight until nothing remains." His shadow stretched long across the den walls, a warning carved in darkness. Outside the cries grew sharper, echoing with hunger. For Ash, the world was nothing but sound, scent, and fear pressing close, and yet, in the fragile bond of warmth, a spark of survival flickered. The forest groaned as if alive, and every sound was a threat. Ash's breathing quickened, his chest rising in tiny bursts. Lira pressed her muzzle against him, shielding him from the cold drafts that crept inside. Kellan lowered his head, sniffing the air, each breath dragging in the metallic taste of danger. His fur bristled as he said, "They know we are here." Lightning tore open the sky, revealing shadows that moved with cunning patience. Ash's vision blurred, but the rhythm of his mother's heartbeat was steady, a fragile promise against the storm. The ground shook with a distant crash of falling timber, and the den shuddered as if it too feared collapse. Lira whispered, "Stay silent, my son." The words trembled like a secret prayer. Outside, rival eyes glowed faint, their hunger piercing the night. In that instant, survival became less about strength and more about endurance, and every heartbeat inside the den carried the weight of eternity. The den smelled of damp earth and fear. Ash whimpered softly, and Lira hushed him with a gentle nudge, her body tense as a bowstring. Kellan stepped forward, nose to the air, growl rising deep within his chest. The storm howled louder, rain slicing through the forest canopy like knives. Lira said, "You cannot face them all." Her voice was broken with dread. Kellan's eyes burned in the flashes of light, and he said, "I was born for this moment." Ash blinked up, his tiny frame trembling against the ground, the storm a cruel cradle for his first night of sight. Outside, rival forms gathered, their low growls a chorus of hunger and defiance. The air thickened with inevitability, pressing down like stone. Ash's world was already forged in terror, but within it burned the fragile flame of his family's fight. In that fragile spark, the night carved the law of survival. The forest fell into an eerie stillness, as if even the storm paused to watch. Ash's wide eyes reflected faint firelight from lightning strikes outside. Lira's breath came shallow, her flank rising and falling against his tiny frame. Kellan stood motionless at the cave's edge, every muscle carved in tension. A rival howl shattered the silence, closer now, bold and merciless. Lira whispered, "They will not wait until dawn." Kellan growled, "Then we give them no dawn to see." His words struck like steel in the dark. Ash pressed tighter against warmth, shivering as shadows stretched long across the den. The night felt endless, time slowed to a crawl, every heartbeat a thunderclap inside the small space. Outside, the forest bristled with the sound of claws and hunger circling closer. Ash's first sight of the world was not gentle but cruel, and in that cruelty, survival was born as a promise carved in lightning and fear. Dawn tried to bleed through the storm clouds, but its light barely touched the den. Ash blinked against the faint glow, his body pressed to Lyra's warmth. Kellan stood restless, pacing, his eyes sharp with the weight of the night's siege. The cries of rivals had faded into silence, leaving a tension more dangerous than sound. Lira whispered, "They wait, they hunger, they will return." Her voice carried the exhaustion of a mother who knows what it costs to protect life so fragile. Ash whined, hungry, weak, yet alive. The world beyond the den was cruel, but here inside, the bond between them pulsed stronger than fear. Kellan lowered his head, brushing against Lyra's flank, and said, "We will not let him fall." His growl was softer now, not a warning but a vow. The silence outside pressed like stone, but the family's closeness glowed like fire in the darkness. The storm thinned, and with it came the scent of pine and damp earth. Ash lifted his head weakly, his small nose twitching at the unfamiliar fragrance. Lira lowered her muzzle, guiding him closer to her warmth, whispering in touch that he belonged. Kellan's ears flicked as he studied the tree line beyond, his body taut like a string pulled to breaking. The silence of the forest was too complete, a mask stretched over lurking danger. Ash whimpered, paw stretching clumsily, and for a moment the fragility of life filled the den more deeply than fear. Lira murmured, "He must learn the world is cruel, but also that it is worth living." Kellan's gaze never wavered as he said, "And for him I will fight until there is no breath left in me." The words fell like stone, steady and unyielding, anchoring their fragile hope against the weight of approaching darkness. Ash's eyes opened wider with every flash of light, his vision sharpening, though still hazy with newborn fragility. The den seemed vast to him, shadows stretching and contracting with each faint flicker of morning. Lira pressed close, her flank firm and warm, her heartbeat steady in rhythm, to calm his trembling. Kellan crouched low near the entrance, his breath slow but weighted with tension. He whispered, "They are out there waiting." Lira said, "Then let them wait." Ash shifted, pressing his nose against her fur, unaware of the war circling just beyond. The silence of rivals outside was deceptive, the pause of predators who understood patience as well as hunger. In the fragile heartbeat of the den, Ash was shielded by love he could not yet name, but which defined his every fragile breath. The forest outside dripped with rain, each droplet striking the ground like the ticking of time. Ash stirred, his first clumsy movements pressing him against the rough stones of the den. Lyra immediately guided him back, licking his fur to calm him, her amber eyes filled with both love and dread. Kellan's growl rumbled faintly as he said, "They circle, unseen but close." His gaze pierced the tree line where shadows pooled like black water. Ash whimpered, unaware of the claws sharpening in the dark, but drawn only to the warmth pressed around him. Lira whispered, "He is not ready to see the world outside." Kellan answered, "The world will not wait for him to be ready." Their words clashed like steel in the quiet, leaving the den heavy with the burden of choices they could not escape. The first light of morning cut weakly across the cave mouth, streaking shadows into gold and gray. Ash blinked, dazzled by the sudden brightness, his tiny body twitching in surprise. Lira curled tighter around him, shielding him from the chill. Kellan remained motionless at the entrance, his eyes locked on a distant movement among the trees. He whispered, "They test our fear, waiting for weakness." Lyra's voice trembled as she replied, "We will not break." Ash pressed deeper into her warmth, sensing only the rhythm of her heartbeat and the vibrations of his father's growl. Outside, a rival howl shattered the morning air, its hunger unmistakable. The fragile peace of the den broke apart, leaving only the stark truth. survival demanded more than love. It demanded readiness, sacrifice, and the strength to endure what circled ever closer. The forest awoke with menace, every sound sharper, every movement heavier with intent. Ash pressed closer to Lira, his small frame trembling at each crack of branches. Kellan prowled the den's edge, eyes narrow, tail rigid, his breaths a rhythm of warning. Lira whispered, "They do not stop, they wait, they hunger." Her tone was soft but hollow, stripped of comfort. Ash whimpered, paws twitching, his senses overwhelmed by scents of wet pine and looming danger. Kellan growled low, his gaze catching the faint outlines of rival wolves slipping between the trees. The storm had passed, but silence was more suffocating than rain. Lyra's heartbeat pulsed against Ash, her warmth the fragile thread holding him steady. Kellan said, "They test our patience, but we are not prey." His words were steel, a fragile defiance carved in the darkness. Ash lifted his head unsteadily, his newborn eyes wide with the growing shapes outside. Lira bent low, guiding him back into her warmth, yet her gaze stayed fixed on the danger beyond. Kellan crouched low, his ears flicking at every faint rustle, his frame casting long shadows inside the den. The forest carried whispers of claws brushing damp soil, the steady encroachment of rivals waiting to strike. Lira murmured, "He must not see their faces yet." Kellan answered, "He will, and sooner than we wish." Ash whimpered again, the sound trembling through the den like broken glass. His first view of the world was darkness pressing closer, a truth no newborn should hold. The silence thickened, every heartbeat inside the den echoing like thunder. The rivals moved closer now, their eyes glinting faintly in the dim. Kellan bared his teeth, the sound of his growl rolling like stone grinding against stone. Lira pressed tighter around Ash, her body a shield of trembling strength. The forest exhaled its dread, every tree swaying as though bent under the weight of hunger. Ash's tiny body shivered, his breath shallow, his first lessons of the wild carved in fear. Lira whispered, "We must endure, even in silence." Kellan's gaze did not break from the dark forms weaving closer, his chest rising with the strain of restraint. The world narrowed to the den's mouth, a fragile boundary between life and teeth waiting to tear it apart. The den trembled with tension, a fragile space holding back the tide of violence outside. Ash pressed against Lira, whimpering softly, his body too small for the weight of the night. Kellan paced in tight circles, his fur bristling, every movement a declaration of readiness. Beyond the trees, a rival howl pierced the stillness, close and merciless. Lira whispered, "They wait for our weakness." Kellan growled, "Then they will not find it." His frame filled the cave mouth, his eyes locked on every shifting shadow. Ash blinked, catching glimpses of glowing eyes that pierced his newborn vision. His world was fear and warmth clashing together, survival painted in lightning and hunger. The rivals advanced, their growls vibrating through the earth, closer now, relentless. Ash whimpered, curling deeper into Lyra's warmth, yet his eyes flickered open, catching flashes of looming shapes. Lira pressed her muzzle against him, trembling but firm, whispering, "Stay hidden, little one." Kellan stood tall at the entrance, his frame silhouetted against faint dawn light, his growl rising into a roar that shook the silence apart. The forest answered with snarls, the promise of blood woven into every sound. Ash's tiny chest rose and fell rapidly, each breath drawn between fear and survival. The night's siege had ended, but the rising conflict had only begun, its weight pressing into every heartbeat inside the fragile den. The rivals did not strike but lingered, their eyes burning through the fog like coals that would not fade. Kellan bristled at the silence, every muscle demanding battle, yet they held back. Lira bent low over Ash, whispering with her body more than words. The den filled with the rhythm of shallow breaths, fragile yet unbroken. A shift cracked through the tension as one rival stepped forward, her frame smaller, leaner, her ribs visible through her pelt. Hunger was carved into her every step, but so was desperation. Kellan stilled, his growl faltering for a breath. Lira whispered, She is not just predator. Ash's eyes flickered, his newborn gaze catching the trembling rival. The truth broke through the storm of fear. Survival cut in more directions than they had believed. The rivals were not only hunters, but the hunted by their own hunger. The rival female stopped at the edge of light, her body swaying with weakness, her eyes fierce yet hollow. Kellan lowered his stance, torn between strike and stillness. Lira pressed against Ash, whispering, "She carries no triumph, only loss." The air thickened as rival eyes flickered in the background, waiting, measuring. The female rival did not lunge, only stared at Ash with a gaze heavy as stone. Kellan's chest rose, his growl sharp but unspent. Words ground through his teeth. "She is mother too." Ash whimpered, sensing the fracture in the air, a moment not shaped by teeth, but by understanding. Silence pressed like thunder, holding the truth in its jaws. Even hunters carried the weight of fragility. The rival female lowered her head, a gesture neither surrender nor challenge, but survival itself. Behind her, shadows shifted, restless with hunger, unwilling to wait much longer. Kellan stiffened, his claws digging into earth, torn between his duty and the strange mercy in front of him. Lira whispered, "She pleads without words." Ash whimpered, his first sounds rising into the tense stillness. The rival's ears flicked, her hollow frame trembling, yet she did not strike. Instead, she backed into shadows, leaving the pack with a truth carved deep. Even danger carried weakness. Kellan said, "This night is not as it seemed." The rivals melted into fog, but their hunger lingered, wrapping the forest in silence. The den exhaled as silence returned, though unease clung to the air. Ash blinked wide-eyed, his fragile world shaken by what lingered beyond. Lira curled tighter, her warmth steady but her gaze distant, haunted by the rival's hollow form. Kellan prowled the entrance again, but his growl carried less fury, more burden. He whispered, "Not every enemy strikes with teeth. Some starve with us." The words were jagged, spoken as if foreign to his own mouth. Lira said, "Survival is not only ours, it is theirs too." Ash pressed deeper into her fur, unaware of the truth shaping his fate. The den seemed smaller now, not from fear, but from revelation. The forest held more than enemies, it held mirrors of their own struggle. The rivals did not vanish. Their howls echoed faintly, softer now, like lament more than threat. Ash trembled, his first night shaped by storms and truths too heavy for his small heart. Lira whispered against him, "The world is cruel, yet it bleeds the same for all." Kellan sat at the cave mouth, no longer rigid but still unyielding, his eyes fixed on the shifting fog. He said, "This fight is not finished, but it is not simple." The forest breathed with hidden hunger, the silence layered with questions. Ash blinked again, his tiny chest rising, his life pressed between fragility and endurance. In the den's fragile warmth, truth lingered. Enemies were not always what they seemed, and survival demanded more than strength. It demanded understanding. The forest erupted with snarls, shadows no longer lingering but lunging forward. Kellan sprang from the den mouth, his roar cutting the fog like fire through dry grass. Lira pressed her body tighter around Ash, her breath trembling yet unbroken. The rivals poured from the trees, hunger burning in their eyes, their paws tearing the soil as they surged. Ash whimpered, his body trembling against the ground, eyes wide with fear. Lira whispered, "You will live, no matter the cost." Kellan's growl shook the air as he collided with the first rival, their bodies slamming into earth, a storm of fur and teeth. Ash blinked, his first view of battle, a blur of chaos and blood. The night's patience had broken, and now survival demanded fire. Kellan's roar thundered as claws raked against him, his teeth tearing into one rival's shoulder. Blood sprayed across the ground, staining wet earth. Lira held Ash tighter, her amber eyes locked on Kellan's frame battling in the fog. Rivals circled with fury, waiting for their chance to strike. Ash whimpered, his tiny body trembling, his gaze fixed on the chaos. Lira whispered. "Close your eyes, little one," but Ash could not look away. Kellan snapped his jaws, throwing one rival to the ground, his breath ragged but unyielding. The den quivered with each clash, the law of survival written in pain and defiance. The forest echoed with howls of hunger and fury, a chorus of merciless truth. The rivals struck together, two bodies lunging at once, claws raking across Kellan's flank. His growl turned to a snarl, teeth snapping like thunder. Lira flinched but did not move, her body still locked around Ash. She whispered, "Your father is the wall between us and death." Ash blinked, his newborn vision burned with the sight of blood spraying across the dawn. Kellan staggered but lunged forward again, dragging one rival into the soil, his jaws unrelenting. The forest shook with the violence of the fight, each clash ripping deeper into the earth. Ash whimpered, pressing into Lira's chest, his first memory carved in fear and blood. The climax had arrived, brutal and unstoppable. The den echoed with violence, Kellan's body slamming against earth, his growl torn into the storm of snarls. A rival claw raked his face, but he did not falter. Lira lowered her muzzle against Ash, whispering with trembling resolve, "If he falls, I will stand." Ash whimpered, pressed so tightly he could hardly breathe. Outside, Kellan roared again, his teeth sinking deep into a rival's throat, ending its hunger with a violent shake. The forest quivered with the sound of death, but others still circled, their eyes burning. The fight was not over, and each breath was a gamble between survival and loss. The last rival lunged, jaws snapping with merciless hunger. Kellan met him head-on, their bodies colliding like boulders in a flood. The earth shook as they rolled across wet soil, teeth flashing, claws carving. Lira's breath came sharp, her eyes burning with fear and fire. Ash whimpered louder, trembling under her chest, his tiny body pressed into her warmth. Kellan roared once more, his jaws locking on the rival's throat, crushing until the forest fell silent. Blood stained the ground, steam rising in the dawn mist. The den stood, battered but unbroken. Ash's first glimpse of the world was brutal, carved in love and sacrifice. The climax ended in silence heavier than the storm itself. The forest fell into silence, broken only by the ragged breaths of Kellan. Blood dripped from his muzzle, his chest heaving as he stood over fallen rivals. Lira pressed closer to Ash, her body trembling with relief and grief entwined. Ash whimpered, sensing the heavy air that clung to the den. Kellan staggered back toward them, his eyes burning with exhaustion but still sharp. He whispered, "It is finished, for now." Lira lowered her head whispering, "The dawn costs more than we can bear." Ash blinked, his first nights shaped by violence he could not yet understand. The forest seemed vast, its silence absolute, as if nature itself had spoken its final word. Kellan lowered himself at the den's mouth, his body heavy and scarred, yet his eyes unbroken. Lira guided Ash closer to her chest, her muzzle brushing his tiny frame. She whispered, "You will remember warmth before you remember fear." Ash whimpered, his fragile paws twitching as if reaching for something unseen. The storm had ended, but its memory clung to every broken branch outside. Kellan's growl was faint now, not defiance but warning to the silence itself. He said, "The forest has not finished with us." Lira's gaze flickered to the tree line, knowing truth lingered in every shadow. Ash's small breaths rose steady, his first fragile rhythm of survival. The world beyond the den glistened with dew, every blade of grass wet with blood and rain. Ash blinked wide, his gaze flickering toward the pale light, drawn yet afraid. Lira pressed against him, whispering, "Not yet, little one, not yet." Kellan limped forward, his scars catching the faint glow, a reminder of the fight just ended. He exhaled slowly, his frame shuddering under the weight of survival. The air was heavy with absence, the silence of rivals gone yet not forgotten. Ash whimpered again, curling tighter into warmth, his heartbeat rapid as thunder had been. The den stood, battered but unbroken, the fragile cradle of life resisting collapse. Kellan lay at last upon the earth, his body rising and falling like a wounded drum. Lira bent low, brushing her muzzle against his fur, her amber eyes wet with unspoken grief. Ash stirred, climbing clumsily over her flank, drawn toward the scarred figure of his father. Lira whispered, "Do not fear his wounds. They are the proof of love." Kellan's eyes flickered open, catching the fragile figure before him. He whispered, "He must learn strength in pain." Ash whimpered, pressing his tiny frame against his father's chest, his first act of instinctive loyalty. The dawn light framed them, binding blood and survival into a single fragile truth. The forest stretched silent, its mist curling like ghosts among broken trees. Ash's small chest rose steady now, his eyes closing as exhaustion overtook him. Lira curled tighter, her warmth encasing him, her gaze still sharp on the world outside. Kellan raised his head weakly, his voice low but resolute. "The night will come again, and we will be ready." Lira whispered, "We endure because we must." Ash shifted in sleep, his tiny paws twitching as if still dreaming of storm and growl. The den's silence was heavy, yet it carried survival's fragile melody. Nature had not shown mercy, but it had left them standing, scarred but whole. The forest lay hushed, its silence heavier than thunder. Ash stirred, his eyes opening faintly, catching the pale morning light dripping through mist. Lira curled around him, her breath steady, though her body trembled with exhaustion. Kellan stood weak but unbroken at the den's mouth, his scars raw reminders of the night's storm. He whispered, "We remain." Ash whimpered softly, pressing deeper into warmth, unaware of the truth that survival carried both love and cost. The forest beyond held no rivals, only silence that echoed like a warning of nights yet to come. Ash blinked into the mist, his small eyes reflecting both fear and fragile hope. Lira pressed closer, whispering through touch alone, her body a shield of warmth against cold stone. Kellan's gaze lingered on the tree line, scars burning, but eyes resolute. He murmured, "The forest waits for us, as it always will." Lira replied, "And we wait for nothing but dawn after dawn." The words floated heavy, truth carved by loss yet bound to endurance. Ash whimpered, his breath faint, his chest rising in fragile rhythm that marked him as survivor. The mist curled low, cloaking the forest like a shroud. Kellan lowered himself, his chest heaving but his frame steady, his eyes locked on the unseen distance. Lira bent low, brushing Ash's head with her muzzle, her whisper soft as breath. "You are born into a cruel world, but you will live." Ash stirred, pressing his nose against her fur, his body trembling yet unbroken. Silence stretched wide, heavy with ghosts of the night, yet the den stood whole, fragile against eternity. The echo of survival lingered in every breath. The air carried faint howls, not threats but laments drifting across the fog. Ash's ears twitched, his newborn body shivering as if sensing voices older than himself. Lyra's eyes darkened, her muzzle pressed firmer against him, a silent vow of endurance. Kellan lifted his head, scars glowing in pale light, his voice low. "We are hunted, but we endure." The silence that followed was vast, pressing into every shadow. Ash whimpered again, his sound soft yet piercing, a fragile heartbeat against eternity's weight. The final light of dawn broke through mist, striking the den with fragile gold. Ash blinked, his tiny chest rising, his gaze catching both the scars of his father and the warmth of his mother. Lira whispered, "The world will remember you through survival." Kellan's eyes glowed faint in the light, his voice steady though weak. "This is the law of life. Endure." Silence fell again, not empty but eternal. Ash whimpered, his sound carrying like an echo through the forest, soft yet unforgettable. The story closed not with mercy, but with survival carved into the bones of dawn.